Number 10. The February 9 Killer. The February 9 Killer was a serial killer who convinced his victims with his charm to open their front door and let him into their homes. He would only strike on February 9th of each year. This serial killer's obsession with the 9th of February will probably never be understood. We do know that all of his victims were Hispanic women. It has been reported that the police have a DNA sample of the February 9th killer in their possession. But if this killer decides to never strike again, it's likely he'll get away with murder. Number 9. Charlie Chopoff. This serial killer received his infamous name because of the brutal way he murdered his victims. This serial killer tried to exclusively target African American children. Charlie Chopoff's first victim was an 8-year-old African American boy named Douglas Owen. In 1972, Owen was found dead on a Manhattan rooftop. He had been stabbed 38 times and his body had been chopped up. Over the next year, 2 other young boys would be found stabbed to death in the same gruesome fashion. Police did arrest a suspect named Erno Soto after he confessed to the murder of one of Charlie Chopoff's victims. However, a survivor of one of Charlie Chopoff's attacks couldn't pick out Soto from a police lineup. As a result, Soto was found not guilty of the heinous crimes. Even so, the Charlie Chopoff murders came to an abrupt halt after Soto's arrest, leaving police to believe that he is still the most likely suspect. Number 8. The Honolulu Strangler. The Honolulu Strangler was a horrifying serial killer who terrorized the residents of Hawaii for years. This killer murdered a total of 5 women in the 1980s. The first victim of the Honolulu Strangler was a 27-year-old woman named Vicky Purdy. When her body was found, there was clear evidence that she had been raped, strangled, and had her hands tied behind her back. The killings didn't stop there. Over the course of the next 3 months, 3 more women would be found murdered the exact same way. When the police finally managed to identify a suspect, the suspect's girlfriend told the police that whenever the 2 of them would get into a fight, the suspect would leave and the Honolulu Strangler would find another victim. Despite this testimony and the fact that the suspect failed a polygraph test, the police were forced to let the suspect go due to lack of evidence. However, just like Charlie Chopoff, the murders in Honolulu stopped right after the police released their only suspect. Number 7. Stoneman. The Stoneman is India's most notorious serial killer. 13 murders in Calcutta have been connected to the Stoneman, and a possible dozen more are suspected to be his work in the city of Bombay. Stoneman's first victim was in 1989. The victim was a homeless man who was killed when his skull was shattered with a stone. Over the next 6 months, 12 more homeless people in Calcutta were brutally murdered the same way. The police brought in a number of suspects but weren't able to charge anyone with the murders. The Stoneman's killing spree ended after the police questioned their suspects, meaning the Stoneman was one of the people brought in for questioning but was let go. Number 6. Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper is responsible for the murder of 5 victims. All of these victims were prostitutes who had their throats slit before being mutilated by the Ripper. In 3 cases, the Ripper even kept a souvenir from his murders: the internal organs of his victims. Although police from the era put out a massive manhunt for Jack, and were even sent a letter from the killer himself, which contained a half-preserved kidney, no one was able to discover who Jack the Ripper actually was. Number 5. The Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac was a deranged serial killer who ambushed his victims in a black executioner's hood and left a strange zodiac symbol at each crime scene. He would often brag to the police about how many people he had killed and taunted them for failing to catch him. In his coded letters sent to the police, the Zodiac Killer promised that if they could crack his code, his identity would be revealed. Only one of his letters has been decoded, and it contained a disturbed rant about how much pleasure the Zodiac took in murdering innocent people. The closest the Zodiac ever came to capture was when a police officer rushed to the scene of one of the Zodiac's murders and spotted a man leaving the area. However, for some reason, the radio dispatcher had instructed the officer to be on the lookout for a black suspect, and the officer ignored the fleeing Zodiac Killer. Thanks to this one simple mistake, the Zodiac got away. and the gruesome serial killer's identity is still unknown to this day. Number 4. Jack the Stripper. Jack the Stripper is the nickname of a serial killer who was active in London between 1964 and 1965. Like Jack the Ripper, Jack the Stripper murdered prostitutes. He murdered between 6 and 8 prostitutes and then dumped their bodies into the River Thames. Jack the Stripper's first known victim was named Hannah Tailford. Her body was found in 1964. She had been strangled and some of her teeth were missing. When the head of the investigation to catch Jack the Stripper held a press conference announcing that they had narrowed down their suspects to just 3 people, the killings immediately ended. It's likely that Jack the Stripper got away with murder. Number 3. The Rainbow Maniac. From February 2007 to August 2008, 13 gay men were murdered in Brazil in an area called Pachuras Park. All the victims were men between the ages of 20 and 40 who died from gunshots directly to the head. Authorities also suspect that the Rainbow Maniac is responsible for several other deaths in nearby areas and may be a former police officer. While a suspect was reported to have been arrested in 2008, he was never convicted and the crimes remained unsolved. Number 2. The Frankford Slasher. From 1985 to 1990, 9 murders occurred in Philadelphia, where the victim was sexually assaulted and then brutally stabbed. Authorities arrested Leonard Christopher, a black male that worked at the fish market near the location of the murder. He didn't fit any witness description, and there was little to no evidence of his involvement, but he was convicted anyway and sentenced to a life in prison. But months after Christopher had been arrested, a victim named Michelle Denner was killed in the exact same fashion as the other victims of the Frankford Slasher, meaning the man sent to jail was probably not the Frankford Slasher. And the real Frankford Slasher is likely still out there. Number 1. Colonel Mustard. Colonel Mustard is believed to have killed his victim in the kitchen with a candlestick. No wait. This isn't right. Number 1. The West Mesa Bone Collector. In February 2009, the remains of 11 different women were found buried in the desert near Albuquerque, New Mexico. All the women were prostitutes, and the murders were believed to have been committed by a single serial killer known as the West Mesa Bone Collector. The victims ranged in age from 15 to 32, and all disappeared from 2003 to 2005. No official suspect has ever been identified. Police have yet to even come close to catching the West Mesa Bone Collector because this serial killer left no witnesses and no DNA evidence. If you enjoyed this video or are completely terrified, be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you all next time.